Welcome to the Learning and Development Channel, where you can learn, lead, and make a difference.
We'll clarify basic concepts. We will identify main obstacles to organizational communication. In the real world, intercultural relational communications model will be introduced. Effective intercultural communication will be discussed, hopefully more extensively. We'll talk about cultural leadership, more on leadership, and I'll close with the concept, introducing you to the concept of appreciative inquiry. So, of course, you have been mentioning this in your presentations, in your sharing, that the world is VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. It's also described as bunny, brittle, anxious, nonlinear, incomprehensible. Some scholars also mention that the world is wrapped, rapid, unpredictable, paradoxical, entangled. And another group of scholars also claim that the world is turbulent, uncertain, novel, ambiguous, and the final group of scholars describing our realities in the 21st century use the DVUCAD as an acronym to describe disruption, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, and diversity as real realities in our world now. And of course, I think all of you are aware that yes, learning is not happening in many school systems. This World Development Report for 2018, this figure comes from the pages of the World Development Report published in 2018, identifying the factors that cause the breakdown of learning. If learning is not happening in the schools, the World Development Report it attributes this to the presence of teachers who are unskilled and unmotivated, presence of learners who are unprepared, presence of school inputs that don't affect teaching and learning, and presence of school management that doesn't affect teaching and learning. If you notice, these factors are essentially being addressed by our matatag reform agenda, the kahit reform agenda of Ma'am Liling. They all are about making teachers more skillful and ready to and be willing to be teachers. They are initiatives that are supposed to make sure that the learners are prepared to learn, uh, initiatives to make sure that the inputs will be useful in effecting learning, and initiatives that will create managers like yourselves who are more focused on learning instead of other things. And this one from an article written by Jeff Jack, Sabiducci, Goktolga, and Smiths in a journal reports main obstacles to intercultural communication in the real world where we are dealing with people coming from other culture, especially as I've said, the context can be the global society, but this could also reflect in our own little ways. Inability to master anxiety and uncertainty when communicating with other cultures. There are those, this was mentioned by the first group to share. Lack of intercultural communication competencies, also mentioned by I think, using other terms, but you were saying that when one is not fully competent and in terms of intercultural communication, it's going to be difficult to effect if to effect smooth intercultural communication. The inability to resolve conflicts arising in intercultural interaction. So yes, because we are diverse, we have different ways of thinking, the different ways of behaving. As you mentioned, we have stereotypes, we have prejudices. We normally have conflicts. And other than the inability to resolve conflicts, we also lack the appropriate conflict resolution strategies and styles. When we do not have this, then intercultural communication will also be difficult. And then hostile reactions to intercultural interactions to account for such as a sense of superiority. You mentioned ethnocentrism, cultural relativity, the premise of universality, and stereotypes. So um, this 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 actually somehow is very aligned with what most of you have mentioned. And there is this mapping of competing organizational cultural values. Of course, you know that the culture is driven by the values cultures have. And this one from the work of Griffith and Harvey tells us that, you know, cultures may be very flexible or very controlling. Cultures may be very particular with internal concerns instead of external concerns. So there are four types of, you know, organizational cultural values that may prevail in anywhere in the world. Like when we're focused on the domestic issues, when we are ethnocentric, we are very much attentive to internal concerns while being very controlling. When we are internationally focused, the term they use is polycentrist. Then we are, yes, um, internally concerned, but more flexible. When we are very controlling and we are pay attention to external concerns, we are multinational focus or regiocentric and or clusters. When and finally, when we are highly flexible and we are external in our views, we are geocentric in our organizational cultural values. And the other term is we are global and network in focus. Another figure in this article from Griffith and Harvey demonstrates that the organizational structure can have an impact on the kind of communication that's happening. An organization that has like very easy ways of communicating would most likely be those that are um, able to communicate in more personal ways than in impersonal ways. When we talk about their consistency on national and organizational cultures, those that have consistent, you know, practice of the aspects of their culture tend to be able to communicate more easily, and those that are homogeneous in their workforce will of course have easier ways of communicating, as you have attributed to the fact that diversity can be a reason for difficulties. So this also would somehow, this figure gives us an idea that the nature of medium the medium of communication used can have an impact on our success in terms of communicating. uh, and when we have very consistent organizational cultures, we will have less difficulty. And when the composition of the workforce is more homogeneous, there would be there would likely be lesser difficulty in terms of communicating. And then there is this model from Griffith and Harvey again, an intercultural relational communication model, which mentions a few things that are important in improving the quality of the human beings in the organization or in the society, like cultural understanding, communication competence, cultural interaction, and communication interaction. The next slides will explain the four things that are mentioned here that are somehow able to affect the kind of relationship quality prevailing in an organization, like cultural understanding, referring to the abilities and cultural knowledge based on our experiences that enables a person to engage in appropriate and meaningful interactions of divergent national and organizational cultures. So when we are able to possess a good level of cultural understanding, we can effectively and meaningfully interact with people from everywhere. And there are certain somehow general ideas, big ideas that Griffith and Harvey have proposed, like when we possess greater cultural understanding of relational partners, uh, the communication competency of partners in the relationship would be enhanced. So the more we are able to understand the kind of partners we have, like the people we are dealing with, the better is going to be in terms of communication. Greater cultural understanding of relational partners increases the level of cultural interaction. So you tend to be able to interact more uh, with your, fellow members of the organization that you also understand very well. When we possess greater cultural understanding of relational partners, we will also be able to increase our communication interactions with them. And when we have greater cultural understanding of relational partners, we will be able to most likely have better relationship quality. For communication competence, it's also ability, it's knowledge related to communication that allows us to engage in appropriate and meaningful communications with network partners who encompass diverse national and organizational cultures. So when we are competent in terms of communication, just like what was pointed out by men, of course, most of those who reported earlier, we will be able to demonstrate that yes, the relational, the cultural interactions will be enhanced. The communication interaction will also be enhanced, and the relational and the relationship quality be enhanced as well over time. So it's important that we, all of us, should possess communication competence. And then communication interaction refers to the way partners or parties in an organization are able to influence and get influence when they do a so-called cultural interaction. The greater communication interaction will enhance, of course, relationship quality over time. And for interaction is the national and organizational cultural adjustments over time due to intercultural communication among network partners. So, the more we are able to interact with people from other cultures, the more that we will be able to somehow establish and nurture deeper or more impactful relationships with our fellow members of the organization. If we're talking about the organizations or societies, if we're talking about societies. And Bonaxia suggests 5 steps to effective intercultural communication in the workplace. We have to be aware of the differences, just like what the groups were mentioning. It's important that we know the fact that we are all different in different ways. Last meeting, I introduced ways of understanding people, that human beings are also really different. Alam na natin yan. Basic psychology, no two individuals are alike. And then when we are open-minded and when we possess empathy, this was also mentioned by those who shared that we have to be ready to embrace the fact that there's diversity in our midst, and we have to be empathetic. We have to always remember that the the people we're working with, the people in our team may have certain unique challenges and experiences that they are going through, which we should also consider. It's also going to be useful, according to Bonasia, if we, this one is as far as the more pronounced cultural diversities around the world is concerned, when we are familiar with the cultural norms and words used in certain places. I know, the ones who shared also mentioned, that the improper use of words may cause, conflicts later on, and the improper use of words may even be harming certain sectors in our society. We should also be able to simplify language without exaggerating. Again, may I refer to my previous experience of studying in foreign university. I've noted that most of our professors tended to talk more slowly. The pace of their language was not the usual pace that they use when they are chatting with people coming from the same language group. When they were talking to us in a multicultural class, they were more like they exerted more effort in speaking more slowly so that we can capture what they were trying to tell us. And it's also important that we are inclusive in in our thinking and in even in our practices. So these are suggested strategies that can address the challenge of doing intercultural communication. Let's proceed to the next part of the lesson, which is the cultural management or leadership model. Um, of course, we were told that among the references we have to read for this lesson is the work of Tony Bush. Those of you who I don't know, I'm not very sure, but uh, ano lang, personal story, I had personally met Tony Bush the first time I presented a paper at the British Educational Leadership Management and Administration Society conference in 1998. He was sitting in my presentation, and he was listening to what I was to say, and he provided feedback. After that, we had a chat. I brought him to the Philippines in 2014. He was our keynote speaker in the international research conference we organized while I was still assistant regional director in Bicol. But when the conference happened, I was already regional director in Calabarzon. But he came over, he rendered the keynote speech during that conference. So I can claim that I personally have met the author of this very important book on education, leadership, and management. I have a copy of his book actually, but I'm taking yeah, so that's how meaningful the reference is to me because yes, he has discussed the management and leadership models and provided a typology that is also aligned with the things that I believe in. But so I'm not going to discuss the formal, collegial, political, subjective ambiguity models, even the managerial, participative, transactional, postmodern, contingency, and moral. What I'm going to, of course, proceed is the discussion of the cultural model for leadership, as discussed by Tony Bush. He's now, I think, with, I forgot, he moved to another university after the first time I met him. But yeah, we were like email mates, mates. If we would exchange emails every now and then until 2 years ago, yata. Um, so what is he saying? The cultural models of leadership emphasize the informal aspects of organizations rather than their social elements. Sorry, may mga na-omit na letters. They focus on the values, beliefs, and norms of individuals in the organization and how these individual perceptions coalesce into shared organizational meanings. So it's not just the formal structures. It's more about the things that comprise the culture, talking about values, beliefs, and norms. Cultural models are manifested by symbols and rituals rather than through the formal structure of the organization. So you do not just go to a school and say, "Show me that you are a practicing cultural leadership." It has to be manifested in terms of symbols and rituals, and you cannot even find an organizational chart demonstrating how the cultural leadership or management model operates. Cultural models assume that beliefs, values, and ideology are at the heart of the organizations. Individuals hold certain idea and value preferences which influence how they behave and how they view the behavior of other members. These norms become shared traditions which are communicated within the group and are reinforced by symbols and rituals. So, one who wants to be cultural in his or her leadership strategy will be very attentive to the values again, the beliefs, the norms, so that you can create, symbols, rituals that demonstrate how the organization is doing, moving forward to attain your your goals as an organization. I'm sure you are familiar with the difference between societal culture and organizational culture. They are different in terms of the basic values. Societal cultures can be different in terms of the basic values, while organizational cultures will differ mostly at the level of more superficial practices, as reflected in the recognition of particular symbols, heroes, and rituals. So, when we talk about the organizational cultures, will be paying attention to some symbols, the heroes and rituals that the organization practices. While essentially for the whole society, it's at the level of values. This allows organizational cultures to be deliberately managed, so we can manage and change organizational cultures, while our societal or national cultures are more enduring and can change only gradually over longer time periods. So yung mga naniniwala that perhaps the reason why the country, the Philippines, is not progressing well is attributable to the kind of culture we have. It will take some more time, a longer period of time for us to be able to effect the changes we want to see. While the culture of an organization can be somehow managed and changed, uh, and I would like to say, normally the most influential person in affecting organizational culture change would be the leader, the school head in the case of schools, the leader in the case of the other organizations. And then the article written by Tony Bush, I took this from one of what he has written on the central features of organizational culture, focusing on values and beliefs of members of organizations. Your goal is to create a shared value, shared belief, shared meaning, shared understanding, and shared sense making. They are, of course, all are different ways of describing culture. These patterns of understanding also provide a basis for making one's own behavior sensible and meaningful. So, um, the challenge for one who wishes to be a cultural leader or manager, effective one, should be able to establish the shared values, nurture shared values, shared beliefs, shared meaning, shared understanding, and shared sense making. So, when the values are shared, I think you have been told, I mentioned it last meeting, in DepEd, it's maka-Diyos, maka-tao, makakalikasan, makabansa. So anything we do should demonstrate that those values are alive in our hearts, in our minds, in our own schools, in our own organizations. The cultural model focuses on the notion of a single or dominant culture in organizations, but this does not necessarily mean that individual values are always in harmony with one another. So the notion is there's a dominant culture, dominant shared values, shared beliefs. There may be different or competing value systems that create a mosaic of organizational realities rather than a uniform corporate culture. Large multi-purpose organizations in particular are likely to have more than one culture. So may mga subcultures din in organizations. Organizational culture emphasizes the development of shared norms and meanings. So shared values, shared the same. What is not allowed or what is abhorrent to a leader should be abhorrent to a member. What is, we do not say, leader yan, principal, pwedeng dumating ng 9:00, kaming mga teacher 7:00. Hindi. It should be if you are all putting value to a shared norm on punctuality, everybody comes on time. That's why I'm very apologetic. I was able to join late. Again, the challenge of being a part-time professor when your boss calls you to a meeting. Although ako yung nagpa-motion to adjourn para makaalis na, but I could not do that until all the agenda items have been covered. Anyway, so the assumption is that interaction between members of the organization or its subgroups eventually leads to behavioral norms that gradually become cultural features of the school or college. Again, yung ako ay while I have violated my own personal policy, I always believe that punctuality is something that should be nurtured among human beings. So I hate it when I'm not able to come on time. And I think I was notoriously punctual when I was still a public servant. The group of norms sometimes also allow the development of a monoculture in a school with meaning shared throughout the staff, the way we do things around here. So, yun na nga, when we have the group norms, the shared norms, there's a monoculture. We've already noted, however, that there may be several subcultures based on the professional and personal interests of different groups. These typically have internal coherence, but experience difficulty in relationships with other groups whose behavioral norms are different. I think I also have been mentioning that, especially in schools, there would be certain subcultures among the younger teachers, the older ones, those at the middle. They will have their separate ways of doing things. Culture is typically expressed through rituals and ceremonies, which are used to support and celebrate beliefs and norms. They are, of course, the schools are rich in such symbols as assemblies, prize givings, and corporate worship. Symbols are central to the process of constructing meaning. So we would have certain activities that allow us to really like recognize those who are exemplars, so we give prizes to those who are able to demonstrate behavior in exemplary ways, the behaviors we desire from the people we work with. Organizational culture assumes the existence of heroes and heroines who embody the values and beliefs of the organizations. They are honored and they typify the behaviors associated with the culture of the institution. Heroes or heroines are those whose achievements match the culture, choice, and recognition of heroes, of course, within the cultural boundaries identified through the value filter. The accomplishments of those individuals who come to be regarded as heroes are compatible with the cultural emphasis. Um, so in Calabarzon, we put up, hindi naman kami ang bago, but we made sure that like our criteria for our Gawad Patnugot has been like always fine-tuned so that the practices, the behaviors, the norms that are needed in an excellent and and in a continuously improving organization is real. We did that. And the concept of cultural leadership from the Unicorn Labs, it's a consulting firm, but the the way they define cultural leadership is something I agree with. A leadership style that articulates a vision for the way things are done in a company. So you create core values, you build the actions around the values, and turn everything into a routine that's practiced by everyone within the company. So when you are practicing cultural leadership, you make sure that the vision is fully articulated, and that vision is anchored on the core values, which are the basis of our actions, and then they become our habits, organizational habits. So we we need to be very mindful of the need for the vision, the values, and our actions to be very consistent, so that the organization can be characterized by the culture that we want them. Uh, I mean that we have identified for them. The Team Academy.co of the UK also says that when we talk about cultural leadership, it delves deep into the culture of the organization. It demands creative thinking as well as collaboration with people from across all different roles and seniority. So we make sure that everybody is considered, and when the effort to establish your culture of the organization is strengthened and reinforced. So, and this one comes from a Harvard Business Review article, What Leadership Looks Like in Different Cultures, written by Primusek and Michael Sanger. They acknowledge that everywhere in organization, you have the core ingredients of leadership. Anywhere, for one to be a good leader, you have to be able to demonstrate good judgment. One is considered to possess good judgment when that person is, ako, if you ask me, one who demonstrate good judgment is prudent, um, is always taking into account what is beneficial for the organization instead of what is beneficial for himself or herself. One who has integrity, I think I've been saying this, is able to walk his or her talk. One who has integrity um, makes sure that her or his behavior is anchored on the things that he or she says. There are people, marami yan, maraming sinasabi, iba naman yung ginagawa. At ang sinasabi, makinig kayo sa sinasabi, huwag niyong tingnan yung ginagawa. The third requirement for any effective leadership is people skills. We, as leaders, deal with people, work with people, so we should know how to inspire them, how to motivate them, and and how to deal with them, how to influence them, how to listen to them as well, etc. People skills or the interpersonal intelligence, if we may use the word of uh, Gardner, is very important. Pero other than this, these are like the kinds of leaders, according to this Harvard Business Review article, in terms of decision making, because of course, the leader, if you ask me, there are two very crucial things that the leader or manager should be able to do. One is decision making. The second is communicating the decision. Kung wala ka ng ibang gagawin, itong dalawa na lang ang pagtuunan mo ng pansin. Kasi yan talaga ang trabaho natin as leaders. So, in terms of decision making, we have two types in this, the kind of leadership that we can find in different cultures. The synchronized leader who would always follow through and essentially, the synchronized leader would normally be of the belief that in order to ascend the organizational ranks, the leader must seek consensus on decisions and drive others through a keen process orientation. Business cycles can take longer as a result, but once all stakeholders are on board, the deal needs to close fast or there is risk of jeopardizing the agreement. Synchronized leaders tend to be prudent and are more focused on potential threats than rewards. So that's the one kind of leader uh, that may be found in an organization. The other kind of leader would be the opportunistic one, if we may use the term used by the authors, who self-initiate and demonstrate flexibility on how to achieve a goal. More or less individualistic, these leaders thrive in ambiguity. However, checking in frequently with team members is advised to ensure others keep up with changing plans. Opportunistic leaders tend to be ambitious risk takers. There are societies. This is what I'm going to say about this article. They are acknowledging that there are societies who would want their leaders to be opportunistic. There are societies who would want their leaders to be synchronized. So, again, the culture of the society will determine which type of leader in terms of decision making is concerned is effective as far as they are concerned. The second area is on communication. As I was saying, you decide, you communicate. The straight shooting leader would confront issues straightforwardly, impromptu performance review meetings with direct reports would occur more commonly in these locations, and leaders address the undesirable behaviors from team members as soon as they are observed. Straight shooting leaders tend to be less interpersonally sensitive. So, yung mga sabi natin, matatalas ang dila o yung mga straight to the point. We also have diplomatic leader in terms of communication style. They would keep business conversations pleasant and friendly. Constructive confrontation needs to be handled with empathy. And then leaders in these locations are expected to continuously gauge audience reactions during negotiations and meetings. These types of managers adjust their messaging to keep the discussion affable. Direct communication is seen as unnecessarily harsh. Diplomatic leaders tend to be polite and agreeable. So again, there could be two types of approaches to communication, and it does not follow that the diplomatic leader will always be the more effective leader. What I'm going to say again is it depends on what the culture or the organizational culture is actually uh, giving us priority. So it depends, even at the level of society, on the kind of the society that we have. And then you also gauge the success of intercultural leaders in terms of their dark side tendencies or their liabilities or sources of personal imperfection. The kiss up, kick down leader, characterized by excessive deference or sudden attention to detail when reporting up, and issuing fiery directives or refusing to compromise when commanding subordinates. They tend to be diligent and dutiful with their bosses, but intense in dominating with their reports. Alam ko, kung papashare ko kayo, ang dami yung ikukwentong ganitong klase ng mga dark side ng ating mga bosses. Ano? Kiss up and kick down. Yun. I think I also shared last week na ang problema sa atin, most of us Filipinos, or most of us human beings, pagkausap yung boss, ang bait-bait. Pag ang kausap ay mga subordinates, ang pait-pait. Uh, so, this is one, parang negative aspect that we will find among the people in the organization. Yung masyadong sweet pag boss, tapos pag subordinate, palaging nambubuli. The passive aggressive leader becomes cynical, mistrusting, and eventually covertly resistant, particularly under stress. They tend to be critical and resentful. Ironically, their aversion to conflict often generates a great deal of conflict. So, itong isa naman, wala lang pakialam, bahala na kayo dyan. Pero masama ang loob or mapait ang pakiramdam. So, those are some uh, leadership would say leadership approaches that can be found and that can match a culture depending on their values and norms. Let's now proceed with the video. I hope you've watched this video, The Crisis of Leadership and a New Way Forward, from Hala Thomas Luther. Uh, and this one is about hubris or cancer in leadership. And when kailan si hubris nakikita? When leaders think they know it all, can do it all, with all the answers, and don't think they need to surround themselves with people who will make them better. Which to me, this is her word, would in some cases be more women and younger people and people who are diverse and have different opinions in general. Present in most leaders, hubris syndrome. So, is there anyone who would like to, let's finish this first para ano, yung video niya. This Hala actually is calling for bold and brave leadership. The bold and the brave leadership, we need to come up with solutions that cross government, private sector, civil society, young people, older people of all different backgrounds coming together is the way to, to solve the issues that are in front of us. So she's she's in need. She's calling for bold and brave leaders that would have to embrace a moral compass of our own to figure out why we exist and how we're going to lead. And if we embrace courage and humility in equal amounts, each one of us can be part of this 10-year period where we can dramatically transform the world we live in and make it about humanity and not just the financial market. So Hala is recognizing that the moral compass, this would refer to the values, the moral, um, our clearly identified good or desirable things versus those that are, undesirable or evil. And the leaders, according to this video, should possess courage and humility. Sige, quick ano lang muna, recitation from not necessarily yung sinabi nyo kanina. For this particular video that has been shown to us on uh, TED Talks, what could be the reason why some leaders or sabi niya, many leaders are affected by hubris syndrome? Any volunteer? You may unmute yourself. Hindi ko kayo makikita pag nakataas ang kamay. Unmute yourselves and ano, while I get water. Anyone? So, sa akin, I think you heard me say this last time, yung mga parang naglilihi na matagal nang nag-menopause. Naglilihi na hindi naman magme-menopause ever. They are actually, I think they are insecure. They do not have a deep sense of security. So they behave as if they know everything. Uh, Again, sabi ng pinapapanood sa ating video, we have to be clear about our moral compass. We should be courageous and at the same time humble. It's very difficult to be courageous when we are in the midst of very difficult challenges. Of course, it's also difficult to be humble when a lot of people are attacking us. So the tendency is for us to show and to boast about the things that we have. We have to be mindful of these realities pointed out in that video. The other video that was also part of the course materials is great leadership is a network, not a hierarchy by Jit Fredrickson. What were the critical points mentioned in this video? Sabi niya, and in a network, everyone's in charge and we replace power of the few with influence of the many. So when you lead through networks, you do not put premium on the power of the few, but you pay attention to the influence of the many. Mas gusto mong pakinggan or hanapin kung paano, anong nasa saloobin ng marami and then, yeah, you allow that influence to prevail. Sure, again, this is from the word of Jill. Sure, it looks more messy, but I'd argue more beautiful, more multidimensional, more dynamic, more like nature. So, yeah, the video is suggesting that we have to now nurture networks. Remember, my prince, the end is about networks, network building. I believe this model can help us do more and be less dependent on its individual, which means it's resilient and progress is sustainable. So, if the model, like paying attention to network, is part of your practices as a leader, you'll end up becoming more resilient and you can push for more sustainable progress in your organization. What do you do? How do we do this? The first thing, remove labels. Labels take many forms and shapes like functions, titles, genders, nationalities, educational backgrounds. Sorry to share, but although when I am engaged in a graduate school, I also do not complain when I'm called a doctor because that should give me like the legitimacy to to teach because you should have postgraduate degrees for you to handle classes in graduate schools. But in depth ed and in any other groups, I never got mad when people would not call me a doctor.
Like and subscribe to the L&D channel on YouTube using the link youtube.com/at Learn to Lead channel. For more information, visit our NAAP Region 8 official Facebook page at facebook.com/NAAPR08.